Hello and welcome. I'm your host Petri, and this show helps you to build your company. In this episode, we talk about one of the most difficult things in business: how to sell, build a leading sales organization, and how to manage your team. Professor Paul Viio is not just a leading academic in the field, but also a practitioner who has built many startup sales teams over the years. There's a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Hey Paul, how are you doing?
Hi Petri, I'm very well, thanks. What about yourself?
Well, it's been quite interesting times, and sales is rather hard in the 2020s. I don't know why, maybe you know why. And another question related, which is quite important, I think, why most of the people are doing sales wrong.
Well, that's a very good question. That's a very good observation. Also, the first one that you mentioned, that sales has changed a lot in the 2020s, thanks to the situation that we are at now. When it comes to why sales is difficult, there are many different points or maybe takes on that. That's actually a reason why I started studying and doing my Ph.D. in selling and sales management, because I think that most people are actually doing sales in the wrong way. They don't really grasp how it should be done and what it actually entails to do sales or to sell, and also to manage sales and to lead sales. So these are very common things that I observe and also get feedback from my clients and customers that they don't really know what they're doing.
But it's just so simple, there are needs and there's someone who actually can fulfill that need. What's the problem?
Well, exactly. Those are kind of the points. And sometimes there was I'm not going to mention the name, but it was former professional racing driver. And he told me, Paul, what's so difficult about selling? You just go out and sell, and that's it. And I said, well, I wish it was that easy, because most of the people out there, they don't find it that easy. And there's a difference between selling and also managing sales and leading sales. And I think when it comes to those, oftentimes I think if you're successful in sales, which most people aren't. So if you're successful in sales, then usually you get promoted, or very often times you get promoted, and then you look at things from your angle and your perspective, and you think that everybody else is going to do things as well as you do. And when they don't, you get frustrated because you don't understand what they're doing wrong. So I think these are kind of things that very few people actually are able to do sales and to be successful at that. And even less people are successful at managing and leading sales. And those few who are, they kind of think that, okay, this is how you should do it, and they stick to old school models and old ways of doing sales, which have maybe worked if you're in a different industry, or if you were in the 50s or 60s when the situation was totally different compared to 2020. And well, maybe that's a longer story, but just to highlight, things have changed a lot. It's not just the 2020s. It has changed since the Second World War. Things changed dramatically. Sales has changed. How people act, how they buy has changed a lot. And that, of course, also entails changes in how you sell. I mean, if a customer acts differently tomorrow than they do today and compared to yesterday, you have to adapt to that. And you have to adapt not only how you do things, but how you understand your customers, what you should be looking at, and how you should communicate to and with customers, and what kind of dialogue you should be having with them. So I think these are things which are really genuinely interesting to observe, to study, to research, and also to train customers, and also to operationalize and put those theories and models into action. So that's kind of how I look at things and what I do.
But there's also this very simple fact which you mentioned me a while ago, which is that 75% of companies and people, they don't have a sales process at all. So, you're not even doing the basic steps to do proper sales. Why is that?
Yeah, that's. I was actually referring to in that discussion. I was referring to a study which was made in the U.S. Some years ago, and what they did was they studied about 1,300 companies, and or the findings in that study pointed at that 75% of companies are not as successful as they could be, because the study showed that half of the companies actually have a selling process in place, only half of them. So, and out of those 50% who had a selling process in place, only half of those, which equals 25% of the total number, they actually follow up on the sales process also. So they actually monitor, they have a sales process and they monitor and they follow up on that. And that kind of maybe sounds interesting as such already. But when you think of the takeaway from that is that 90% of the companies that fall into that 25% bracket who have a sales process in place and who also monitor that and follow up on that, they have much better profits than or higher profits than those who do not do that. If you have a selling process in place, you're going to be better off than most of your competitors. So that being said, that's a good thing if you have one, but then following up and monitoring that you actually work according to that process, that will increase your market dominance even further, or your position on the market at least. So I think this is what I was referring to, that there are many reasons why they don't do that. But I would maybe generally say that they don't bother doing their homework and creating a sales process and also then following up on that.
How they can actually perform at all? Because usually you have some kind of sales targets and you have to, project your sales, and then you have to reach those targets a bit later on. And if you don't have any kind of a process, how they can just, cope with their life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm always mind blown when I see a company which doesn't have a process in place. Maybe it's not as dark as it sounds, because there's also another study which points out that, okay, what kind of a customer relationship are you going to have? Or what type of customer relationship do you have? And that compared to what kind of a selling process or sales process you have in place. So that study they were studying about a couple of thousand companies, both in the US or North America and European Union. So mostly Northern and Western European countries. And they came to the conclusion that if you're going to be a listed vendor, which is the basic relationship that you will have with a customer, ranging all the way to a solutions consultant and trusted partner. Okay, that would be like going from low to high. And then you compare that with what kind of a selling process you have in place. You have maybe no sales process in place. Maybe you have a kind of a semi-fixed sales process in place, and then you have a fixed sales process in place, or structured one, and then you have a dynamic one. Okay, long story short, it shows that those who do not have a sales process in place, they don't really become the trusted partner. Of course, in a few cases that will happen, but from a statistically significant point of view, not enough companies are going to be in that bracket. So it means that you can sell to customers, and you can be successful at that to some extent, but you will only reach a certain level as a sales organization. So look at it this way. Then on the opposite side, companies and sales organizations which have a dynamic sales process in place, they usually end up on a higher scale of their customer relationship. So they don't really stay at the bottom level of just being a listed vendor. They kind of jump that hurdle very quickly, and they get more in deeper relationship with their customers. So they usually are in the box trusted partner and solutions consultant. That's where you usually find them, because they are much further as an organization as opposed to those organizations who don't have a sales process in place. What it actually means is, it's quite funny. Those companies who don't have a sales process in place, okay, that's one category. Then there's the next category who have kind of a sales process in place. What that usually means is that they have a fixed sales process in place, but they don't follow it. And when I ask these sales organizations, the people working in these organizations, so do you follow your sales process? Or first one, do you have a sales process? Yes, we have. Well, do you follow it? No, we don't. Well, what do you put into your CRM or SFAs, or that stands for customer relationship management system or sales automation system? What do you write in those systems? Because you have an electronic system for that. So what do? And they say we keep two parallel systems. One which how we work in real life, and one which we use for our bosses, so that they are satisfied with the results that they see in the CRM system or the SFA system.
Wow.
So that's kind of mind-blowing. That people go as far that they start cheating their own bosses, and the numbers are real, but the data that they put in there might be actually something that they package in a way that makes the boss feel good. And that's kind of very scary, because imagine the amount of resources you will be throwing out the window if you have people working in two parallel ways. One which is for your company, and one which is the one which really generates value for the customer and for your organization. So I think that's really scary. That's a route that I always disencourage customers from going at.
This begs for another question. Why is that? Are the systems so cumbersome that nobody wants to use them? And so that's the reason to go all the trouble of having two systems. Oh,
absolutely.
What's the takeaway from there?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's there are a few reasons, but let's start with the basics maybe. The first, it used to be a couple of decades ago, 10, 20 years ago, salespeople didn't want to give out their information. So they didn't want to share their secrets and their real information about their customers, because it was kind of a one-man show in most cases. The customers were owned by the salesperson, if you will. And the salesperson felt and had the thought that if he or she then puts that information into a system, then he or she becomes redundant. He or she can be replaced by somebody else because all the data is already there. But there was kind of almost a fear of putting in your data into the CRM systems. And I get that. I completely get that. But that was kind of in the old days, because nowadays people have become a little bit more refined in that. They understand or realize that it's not the data that actually does it. It's not what you have written there. That, sure, you can be replaced, but the question of the successful person replacing you, is he or she able to maintain at least the same kind of relationship as you did with the customer, or even create a better one? So it's about the relationship, really. It's between the people. As long as people do business with people, it's going to be very important how you actually deal with people, how they feel about you. So that's kind of one angle of the side. And then another point is that you said, are the systems so cumbersome and difficult to use? Absolutely, yes, they are. Most of the systems I've been trying out, so many CRM systems and sales support systems and SFAs, you name it. And the same problem, I would say, that they are built in one way, and they are, first of all, they're usually pretty ugly. So they're not very nice to look at, unless you like the look and feel of an Excel sheet or any of these. Well, it's the same, in my opinion. If you look at Facebook, for example, their graphical user interface, or Google's graphical user interface, I think they're just mind-blowing how little emphasis they put on that. The same goes with Amazon, for example. So these are just kind of ways of doing things which work for them. Yeah, it's very productive or producer-oriented in that way, I would say. But if you look at what a salesperson really needs to have in a CRM system, it can be very different from case to case. That's one thing. And it can be very different from what the producers or vendors of the software systems or solutions actually think that the salesperson should have. Because the situations are completely different. I mean, let's take a basic example. If you work in a business to consumer, a B2C industry, or if you work in B2B, that's business to business, or B2G, business to government, so the public sector, it's going to look very different what kind of knowledge data and information you need to have for you as to become successful at selling and managing that sales and customer relationship and building on that and managing that account and so forth and so forth. So, and then it comes also to the point that, sorry for dragging out on this answer, but I think these are important points. That if you look at any product, any product at all. I don't care if it's a hard product, a tangible or intangible product, a software or computer, whatever it is. If it's made so that the user will find it difficult to use, he or she will not use it, at least not optimally, or he or she will even try to find another solution. So that's also an important point when you think about what kind of systems you should have in place. Most companies are still in the old era that they produce systems, solutions, software, components, whatever it is, from their perspective. I mean, most companies still do this, as opposed to looking at how and in what shape and form and experience the customer would actually like to have it. So I think these are kind of reasons which drive us into people or salespeople going maybe sometimes even berserk about their sales processes and why they don't feel like using them, or they divert and they use some other alternative way instead, which works better for them. And there's also another dimension to that, if you allow me to add on that. People are very different. I mean, some people want to work in a very organized fashion and way, and they want to have all the data set in one specific way or system, whereas other people are more the artist type of people who are able to comprehend things in a different, more abstractive way maybe. And they need maybe a different system. So within the same sales organization, you might have very different people, different type of people who work in different ways. So try to kind of enforce one system or a system on them is going to prove difficult. That's a fact we have seen, that we continuously see in organizations.
Now we are come to the point where we actually say that most of the people don't know how to do sales. There's only a few really good salespeople. All the systems suck. So should we start to sort of build another world where we say that, okay, I have a new company, I have a startup, and maybe I already have a product, and now I need to start to do sales. I need to find customers. We are in that point. So if I can start from scratch,
sure,
how should I do that? And if I'm the CEO, I need some salespeople, I need someone else. So what's the optimal way of doing that?
Yeah, that's you're looking for a silver bullet, of course, here, as everybody is. There's not one right way of doing things, of course. But how I would start it is that, and how I encourage people and companies to do that, and how I actually train them, is to look at your customers first. I mean, let's imagine you have no customers in the first place. You have an idea, okay? So as opposed to making that idea complete at first and then going out to the market, I would say that, okay, keep it at the idea level first. Go out to the market, talk to potential customers or partners, whatever alliance partners that you might find, and try to get a sense of what they need. What's in your domain, what's in your capability and area of competence that you're actually thinking of doing. And then look at what the market is actually needing. What do they need? And I'm not only talking about the needs that they are aware about, but also unaware needs that they don't know about really yet. Or they might even have some thoughts, or they might even have a dream, okay, and a wish how things could be. And look at that angle instead. Don't go and compete head to head with other competitors who have something similar, but try to look at different avenues. And once you grasp that, okay, this is what the customers might want to have, and they kind of feel is important for them, what would drive them further, what would drive their business, or if they're not doing business, what would drive their life or situation, what would improve it. And that's something that you can help create value in. So that's actually you're helping your customer reach that point or that target, what they're aiming at. And then I would go back and look at, okay, so how do they go about it? How do they buy things like this or in this category that I'm trying to promote or sell or propose to them? And then I get an understanding, okay, so this is how they go about purchasing that kind of solutions and choosing them, and what kind of purchasing processes do they have in place, and what type of categorization of purchases do they use. And then I would from there derive how my sales organization should be working and how my sales supporting functions should be supporting the sales people out there, or sales teams. So I think that's how I would actually plan it and build it, and then go about, okay, now I understand what the market could need. These could be the customers. This could be the prioritization of that. And this is how they work when they purchase those kind of screen, select or shortlist, and then select, categorize, actually purchase these kind of solutions. And then I would build from that. So I would go backwards from that point on, and then see, okay, what does it mean for my sales organization? What type of people do I need? What type of competencies do I need? What type of capabilities? What type of support people? What type of processes should we have in place to make that work in a coherent way? And by coherent way, I mean that it shouldn't differ very much for the customer if they contact me, or if they contact my salesperson, if I'm the sales executive, for example, if they contact me, or if they contact my salesperson, or my sales supporting person, or my technical expert, or whomever, or customer complaint service. So they should have a coherent experience for all that. So they kind of recognize, okay, we're dealing with this company now, with this supplier. And that should not differ very much between the salespeople in the sales organization either. So, well, we can talk about that a little bit later maybe, but...
Yeah, it starts to sound like a customer experience you're talking about. So it actually doesn't matter, are you even talking about with the support person, are you talking about with the marketing person, are you talking anyone in the company, and you should basically get the same experience.
Absolutely, you should. And I mean, this is one interesting thing. Let me rewind maybe a little bit. When companies contact me, they oftentimes contact me because I train sales organizations and executives and so forth, study those and train them and help them become more successful at what they do. Oftentimes there's a CEO or CSO, Chief Sales Officer, or someone up in the organization who contacts me and says, Paul, we need your help. And then I ask, why do you need my help? That's usually my first question. And then they say, well, our salespeople are not performing well, so we need someone to train them how to sell. And I say, okay, that's nice. That sounds good. That's in my ballpark. But do you know how to manage and how to lead a sales organization? And they go like, what do you mean? And I ask, okay, so how do you actually look at your business? How have you built it? How are you guiding your sales force, and how are you supporting them? And that's where it usually starts to crumble, the whole story, because they kind of realize, okay, it's not just about our salespeople are performing well. So usually a sales training organization will be thrown in, and they would say, okay, if you want to double your sales, don't make 50 calls a week, but do 100 calls a week. And that kind of will ramp up the sales. Sure, yeah, of course, it probably does, at least to some extent. But the problem is, especially in a European context, if you look at Europe, which is very much B2B driven in terms of sales and purchasing, if you look at North America, the US, for example, there's the B2C market is so much bigger. And that's kind of where the most money comes in to companies. So in a B2C scenario, it's easy to just call more customers or potential customers to find them and then try to persuade them to buy your stuff, whatever you're selling. But in a B2B scenario, maybe you'd only have a few tenths of customers globally. So how can you double your sales just by calling more contacts? It's not going to work. So it doesn't take off like that. And so that's kind of one story, one side of the story. Another is that salespeople in an organization are very different. I mean, of course, we have those phenomenal salespeople, and I used to have that too in my organization when I was driving sales and leading sales, who are very excellent at what they do. They know exactly how to do sales, and they are the perfect salespeople. But that's just maybe 10% of the people in your sales organization, maybe 20 if you're lucky. But then you have, studies point that, okay, maybe 10% are the top salespeople. Then you have 20% of the sales force that are still very good, but not excellent. And then 70% of the sales organization people are mediocre to laggards. Okay, if you look at
who hired those people?
Exactly, fire that person, right? So if you look at it this way, 70% of your sales organization in general, when we're looking through organizations across the industry, are mediocre to laggards. So their performance is not in line with what the company is looking for. So those people are usually the ones who are then companies get rid of them, and then they try to find new ones, and they try to kind of build a sales organization which would only have excellent salespeople. Of course, everybody likes that. But the problem is, if you look at how those people work, I talk to executives. I look at these organizations and I ask their executives, I ask, okay, so what makes your top salespeople? And they say, Paul, I don't know. I say, what do you mean you don't know? They just, whichever number I give them, they bring it in and they overachieve even that target that I give them. So I just let them do their magic, and I don't want to bother how they work. I don't want to mess with them, because if they feel intimidated or they get frustrated because of my stupid questions or something, they might leave the organization. And I say, sure, that's one way of looking at it, but how on earth are you ever going to replicate your sales success and hiring successful salespeople if you don't even know what type of people they are and what they're built of, how they think, how they work, how they act, how they deal with customers, how they build that success? And that's usually which is kind of what we stumble on in those sales organizations. And people tell me, okay, or the executives tell me, okay, so let's do the training. But usually I do the training for the executives first, and then I do it for sales organization, then for sales supporting organization. But looking at it from a salesperson angle, I always study them and I research them beforehand, so I know who are the top salespeople. I will also see that, okay, this is that person, and this is the mediocre ones, and these are the laggards. And the point with the sales training is not to bump up the whole organization and to make them excellent salespeople. That's not the point. It's not going to happen. You might nudge the organization a little bit forward, but the top salespeople, what they get out of it is that they finally realize, and this is what happens in trainings that I do for companies. The first hour or so, the top salespeople are kind of leaning backwards in the chair, and they're a little bit like, oh, okay, what am I doing here? I already know how to do sales. I'm already perfect at this, so I don't need this mumbo jumbo here. Okay? And those are usually the ones who, at the end of the training, of 1 or 2 day session, come to me and say, Paul, this was the best sales training I've ever been to. And then I asked, okay, that's great. Good to hear. So what did you get out of it? And most of them say, now I finally understand what I do and what other salespeople are not able to do. And so they're able to put names and concepts and models, but the names for those that they actually do intuitively already. And that's very powerful when you see that. It's like mind-blowing when you see people understanding what makes them different from those who are not as successful. So that's one takeaway for them. So they are better able to support their colleagues, the next best category, in becoming one day as good as they are. And then for the people further down the line who are not as successful, the mediocre ones, you can bump them up somewhat. And for the people who are not up to a sales job, they themselves, as well as executives, might realize, and oftentimes I even suggest this to them if I continue working with them, what if we move these people to not do first-line sales, but to support the sales organization instead? Because they're the perfect ones in sales support. They've done it, they tried it, they find it hard, but they know what's needed. So why not use these people to support the rest of the sales organization? So this can work in very nice ways, and the outcome can be just beautiful if you do it right. But as I said, there's many organizations and many ways of doing it. I think as many ways as there are organizations too. So it's not like one right answer. This is exactly how you should do it. But along those lines is what I would do if I had a software company or whichever startup, and I would start building the sales for those.
I have so many questions. One of them is that, can you actually teach anything to those guys who are really already brilliant? And how do you find these people?
There's a combination of things. Okay. First of all, many tell me that, okay, either you are a salesperson or you're not a salesperson. That's the kind of old jargon that we hear, that you're born as a salesperson and you're a natural salesperson, or you're not. Okay. I think there's some truth to that. So you can be born to become a racehorse, or you can be a donkey. Okay. A donkey will never become the most successful in a horse race, I guess. Or if you're a working horse. Okay. So,
well, is that fair for the donkey? It's not the donkey race.
Exactly. So why not use a donkey for something else instead? I don't think that you have to be born as a salesperson, because at the end of the day, what is a born salesperson? If you are born as a salesperson, it probably means that when we study these people and then we look at what makes people successful, it's usually that they are persistent in the way that they don't give in. So they're resilient. Okay, resilience is one word which has become very popular in the last few years, and used in many different ways, and even used wrongly, I think. But anyway, aside that point, successful salespeople are probably resilient, more resilient than other people. You get approximately 7 out of 10 calls, you get a no on the phone if you call someone. That's usually, it might be even up to 90% of the calls are going to be a no. No, thank you, we're not interested. So you need to be resilient about it, and kind of stand up again and learn from your past experience. Okay, what should I do differently? Not just repeat the same old mantra that you've done with the next customer, potential customer, and try to get whatever you're trying to get. Is the first step to get a meeting with them, or is the first step to have them buy something from you on the phone or over email or electronically, whatever it is. You got to know what the next step is going to be. So being very goal-oriented, persistent, resilient, have empathy, and be quite quick to learn things. And also curious. I mean, you need to be genuinely curious and interested in people. As long as we deal with people, I think that's very important, in that combination in that mix of the perfect salesperson, is to be interested in people and curious. And if you look at it this way, if you're not interested in people, it's very difficult to make a good impression on people in a genuine way, because people will see it, if you're just faking it. So that's one thing. And then, of course, people ask me, okay, can you train people, mediocre salespeople, to become very good salespeople, or become better, very good, and then excellent at some point? Yes, you can. My definitive answer is yes, you can. It's going to take a little bit longer time, probably. They have to repeat maybe things quite a few times, and they have to change, and they have to adapt to how the customer works, and they have to change how they work, not who they are, but how they work. So those are things that are needed, because there's a catch to it. Where can I call, for example, to find these salespeople, these excellent salespeople? So imagine you have a startup, okay? You establish a startup, and you try to find a sales organization. You need 25 people in sales for global sales for a startup. What's the risk of employing 25 top salespeople from different organizations? The difficulty is going to be, you're going to have most likely 25 people who work in their own ways, in different ways compared to each other. How on earth are you ever going to manage and lead that organization? How are you even going to know how they work? So it's going to be very difficult to understand what they do that makes them successful in order for you to replicate that way of working, because that's what you're looking for. When you scale your organization from 25 people up to 50 people, up to 100 people, up to 500 salespeople globally at some point, if you're become really successful, then you can't rely on finding those excellent salespeople, because first of all, as I said, they're going to work in different ways. Second point is, it's going to be almost impossible for you to manage and lead them and guide them and monitor them. And the third part is, it's going to be very expensive. It's going to be so expensive, because those people in that bracket of 9% of 10% of sales people globally in organizations, who are the top salespeople, they can name their price. That's why sales executives even tell me that, okay, I don't want to mess with them. I don't want to question how they work, or I don't want to kind of be micromanaging them and so forth, because they're afraid that they will leave. Because those top salespeople, they don't need to look for a job. They get calls every week, most likely, from competitors, from headhunters and so forth, who ask them, would you be willing to work for us? We'll raise your paycheck and do this and that and give you these and these benefits and bonuses. And they do what they do because they like it. And they stay in those organizations because they like the organization. If anything happens, usually we see this when we change the incentive system or model or reward models. If they don't like it, they leave, and they just need to pick up the phone next time somebody's calling and they say, okay, well, you called me a couple of weeks ago. No, I'd actually be willing to hear your offer. And the next day they're gone. And your sales might plummet in your organization if you lose these couple of salespeople. That's a long story why it's going to be difficult. And even I disencourage people from trying to look for the excellent salespeople and hire those, because it's going to be, as I said, difficult and expensive.
Now I'm really confused. So it's like Mission Impossible. Basically, if you want to have only the sort of excellent people, they are all cowboys. So you have a bunch of cowboys, you cannot manage them. If you want to have a sales team, which is cooperative and you know what's happening and you have a processes, then you have just the regular mediocre people there and there's no cowboys anymore. So can we just do marketing and forget the sales?
Exactly. It's all just move into social media and post things on Twitter and do Facebook advertising and so forth, and just let's forget about the salespeople. I mean,
now I understand why it's so complex and nobody does the processes. They don't work and nothing to be done. It's all just a huge mess.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's not that devastating, really. I mean, the truth is, as I said, that you need to look at it as any part of the organization. I mean, let's take product management. If your product is faulty, okay, it has some errors in it. It just, the quality is subpar. Okay. What do you need to do about it? You need to reverse engineer what you're doing. You need to look at, okay, how do we do things? How does it turn into this garbage that comes out the pipeline? And then to fix those things. And the same thing we should do in sales, and look at sales in the same fashion. That, okay, what are we trying to achieve here? Let me step back here a little bit. If we want to build a company which is based on helping our customers succeed, which I think is the long-term plan that we should be looking at, as opposed to the short-term profits that we can generate from quick and dirty tricking people and forcing people to buy stuff from us. If we're looking at the long-term plan, then we should also look at how our sales organization works, and if that is in line with how we actually want to help our customers create value for their organization to become successful in their market space. Then, assuming that, then we should look at our sales organization and start looking and finding out, okay, how do we work in a more optimal way that our sales organization, as a sales organization, not as individuals, works in line with how we want to be performing in the market space for our customers. Okay? And then we'll look at, okay, there might even be top salespeople who are not up to the task, who are maybe just pushing products, who are used to high pressure selling, and who do not want to look at the benefit and the value creation for our customers. So it might even be, this sounds harsh, and this sounds maybe counterintuitive to someone, it might even be that we have to let these people go, or let a top salesperson go. Don't let them all go, otherwise your company will probably go bankrupt. But to change things. And if they are willing and able to change, which they usually are, because excellent salespeople are smart people. Okay, they are really smart. They can really quickly grasp, okay, what does this change mean for me and for my organization and for my personal bank account also? What does it mean for me, for my revenue generation, capability, ability, and also for my paycheck? The idea is that the whole organization would work as a whole. And you will need these excellent salespeople, assuming you're able to actually convert and change a little bit the way how they work, and to learn from them what makes them successful, if those methods are ethical and kind of methods that you want to have your salespeople use. And then learn how to use them in a more broad fashion in your sales organization. So let's look at it this way. I mentioned about the top 10% of sales organizations having, or sales forces actually being consisting of top salespeople. Those one can be perfect for mentoring even the next category, the next 20% who are very good at sales, but not excellent. And then that category, or people in that category, can then mentor the mediocre salespeople to become better at how they do sales. So that's how we can actually build these mentoring systems. But we should avoid the trap that many of us think that would be kind of course, this is how we should do things, right? That why not have the excellent salespeople mentor the mediocre ones? And they would think that they will quicker become excellent. Well, the catch there is that those two categories are too far from each other. So the excellent salesperson will become frustrated when mentoring a mediocre salesperson, because he or she will not understand how on earth this mediocre salesperson is not able to do these things and learn as quickly as he hopes that he or she would learn. That's one side of things. And the mediocre salesperson will find it very, very intimidating and negative to work with an excellent salesperson, because excellent salesperson's teaching and mentoring will feel so far off for him or her. So he or she cannot even relate to how this person is working. This is what studies show, that, okay, this is how you should build up these mentoring systems also in organizations. So yeah, this is again an answer on your question. Where do we find them, and is it impossible to change organization? No, it's not impossible at all. We just need to go in a certain methodology about it. And that's what I do when I train sales organization. It's not just about, okay, this is new slide set and this is how you should enforce it on the customer. This is how you should present it. This is how you should overcome the obstacles or the rejections that customers might have, and force them to buy from you, and then close the sale and then get the signature and send the invoice and go to the next customer quickly. I mean, this is not the way you should do it. Not, especially not if you want to build a business which is based on customer long-term success.
Let me ask you a very simple question. It might be the hardest question. How do you define sales?
That's a question that I usually ask my organizations when I start training them. I ask them actually, what's the difference between marketing and sales? And the common way of looking at things is that, okay, marketing, I mean, most textbooks and in marketing and most managerial books and most organizations also have kind of got this understanding that marketing generates the lead, or that's the lead generating machine, and then sales takes over from there and then starts working in a consistent way to transform that potential elusive customer lead that they have got from the marketing side, and then out the pipeline comes a customer who has bought from you, right? And then it goes into account management. But,
so to be in a bit of a sort of a nasty and simple approach. So it's basically just a subset of marketing and just implementing what's already there.
Not really, no. I said that's not my view of things. That's how organizations usually look at this. But as you know, and we know, and all the people out there know, that things have changed a lot. I mean, marketing. There are companies who tell me, we don't have a sales organization, we just have marketing. We have marketing, we have social media. Well, do you put those in different brackets? No, I would not. I would probably put marketing or social media as part of marketing. But then again, sales and salespeople also do social media marketing and create online presses for the company, for the products, for the services, for themselves, for the whole team. So it's not as simple today anymore, but we kind of, for textbook clarity, we kind of like to keep it that way. Maybe that, okay, sales is not under the umbrella of marketing. I say it's definitely not, but I say they collaborate. But marketing usually has the cost budget. They rarely have a revenue budget or revenue targets. Might have that, of course, in terms of conversion and so forth nowadays, but traditionally they have had a cost budget. Whereas sales, of course, they have a cost budget also, but the most important thing is the revenue stream coming inbound from the markets. But in my view, sales has to do with finding whatever that means through social media, marketing being part of that, or you personally through trade fairs like in the old days, or through different events or personal contacts, network. So finding potential customers, working on those and finding out, okay, what makes sense, who can we help, how do we prioritize those potential customers that we might have there, and then have a dialogue with them to understand their business models and their situation, and then to help them achieve that. And by, of course, for our selling organization to also make money on that along the way. You can also say, okay, is there a difference between sales and selling? Well, you might argue no, but sometimes you might argue yes, there is. And from my perspective, there is. Sales is more the function, the sales function, and the whole kind of area, the domain is sales. And if you're a sales executive, you're responsible for that domain within an organization. And then selling is more the verb, the doing of things. Hence, you might have a sales process, which is looking at it from a sales leadership or sales executive perspective. And the selling process would then be the steps that a salesperson and sales teams conduct when doing sales. So but this is about terminology. I mean, I don't want to become too academic about it, but these are things that you kind of should at least have a vocabulary in your own organization so that you understand what is marketing, what's their responsibility, what's the responsibility of sales and selling, and where does social media fit in? Okay, is it done in collaboration between marketing and sales, or is it a third area? This differs still, and I think this will differ because organizations solve these in different ways.
And there's also the aspect that who is the one who really understands the customer needs? Is it the marketing? Is it the sales? Or is it actually the R&D, the people who are building the products? Because all of these people should actually understand what the customer needs.
Absolutely.
That's basically the whole organization's purpose of existence.
Yeah. I totally agree on that. Yeah, I mean, having just, like in the old days, it was a little bit in textbooks, for example. If you look at it 10, 20 years ago, textbooks oftentimes proclaim that, okay, a salesperson is the one who brings in the feedback to the organization, and this feedback from the market and customers is fed into the R&D system, and they are then able to refine the products and so forth and so forth. Yeah, to some extent, but in today's day and age, an organization which wants to be successful, as you said, Petri, everybody in the organization has to understand what the customer is looking for. Okay, so they have to have at least a basic understanding. Okay, what is the customer looking at? Let's say you're back end. Let's say you're HR. HR is basically not in touch with the products, nor is it in contact with customers, really. I mean, not first line at least. But in order for HR to perform in an optimal way, they have to know what type of resources are needed in the company. Either you hire them or you use other type of solutions like hiring freelance or then outsourcing things and so forth and so forth. So you need to know what type of capabilities, what type of competences are needed in order to solve and in order to meet and in order to exceed those customer expectations, so the customer feels that it's worthwhile working with you in the first place as an organization, and they come back to you and they want to come back to you as an organization and a supplier. So definitely, even HR, I'm not saying that even HR as if it would be so far off from the customers, but it's kind of the best, maybe the best kind of example that I had at this instant here. Everybody needs to understand what the customer really wants and needs and what makes them tick and what's the customer experience, what it's built on. So even the janitor in the company. Imagine you have a customer walking through your premises or next to your premises, and your janitor walks out the door and he or she does not greet, but instead maybe grumps at the customer who is outside your premises. That will have an effect on the total experience that the customer will have only by this one small encounter. If it's really negative, it might have an implication that this person thinks, I don't want to work with this company anymore. It can be as simple as that.
And usually it is. It's those tiny things. It's something you have omit to do. If your process is not working, your delivery process is not working, you're not just saying that, hey, actually it's coming tomorrow, hope you're okay. if you don't do anything, you're already irritating the customer. Or if the delivery person is saying, hey, I don't want to go one floor to your place, so can you come downstairs and pick it up from my truck? Yeah, so it's tiny things, or it's a customer support. Customer's always right, and hey, there's something wrong with your invoice, and they say, no, there's nothing. And that's the end of the discussion. And these are actually 3 examples from my life in the last month. So I think it matters, because I have stopped doing business with some of these organizations just because it feels like that they don't need my business.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, the classic example that we have now from the last 10, 15 years, it has become so widely used solution to outsource your customer complaint or technical support or any call center functions to another country. Let's say, and I don't want to finger point at any organizations or countries or similar, but I'm sure you get the grasp here, that if you give a support line in English, you have international customers calling in. Let's say you have people from Scandinavia, for example, calling a customer center which should speak English, understandable English, and then it's outsourced to a country somewhere far off where they speak very different English, and you might not even understand what they actually say on the phone. This is really annoying, to not understand what the person is. And this happened to me and my wife. My wife was calling one of these organizations. It was a flight ticket. She had a problem with the flight ticket. We needed to reroute her and so forth. This was obviously last year, so this year we haven't traveled much by air, as most people have not. She called the support line and she had to tell the person, please just stop. I need to get my husband on the line. And she walked to me and gave me her mobile phone and said, can you talk to this person? I don't understand what she's saying. And so it can be really that small incident, and that kind of put her off from that airline, because she said, I don't want to call that support line anymore. I don't want to fly on this airline. And then, sure, the airline can think that, okay, it's just one customer out of 1 million customers per year. But gradually, it's going to eat up, slowly but gradually, it's going to eat up on your business. I mean, this is what happens. A classic example, look at Uber. Why did Uber succeed so quickly? Many people say, it's because of their business model, because they were cheaper and so forth and so forth. I don't think that was the whole truth. Because looking at it from this angle, we all remember how many taxi drivers...
You just want to mute them, but you don't find the mute button.
Oh, yeah, that's one thing. And look at it this way. If you get subpar service, you think that, okay, bummer, I would rather ride with somebody else. But then you find out, okay, maybe the other taxi company is maybe just like this one, or the taxi driver in the other car is probably the same. Okay, so we kind of got used to a certain level of service. And then there comes this one company that provides a service which is different. And we think, thank God, finally, I don't have to ride a normal taxi anymore. Okay, so we find this interesting, to have the silence maybe in the car, as you said, to have the mute button on the person asks you, do you want to be for yourself, or do you want to communicate, and so forth. It's much more of a customer experience that I actually get when riding. It's not just Uber, other companies similar to those. It's almost like a touch button in the car, an invisible one, where you can actually have a dialogue with the person. You can get to know about the city if you're there for the first time, or you can just push, as you said, the mute button. And you can sit there and look at your slides, or you can look out the window and just be in total silence. So, and the whole payment thing is just like super easy. I remember the first time I used this kind of a solution was in the US. And I went to the airport, and I was super busy. I was about to miss my flight. And I started fiddling around with my wallet, and I was like, oh my God. Right, okay, so now I have to wait for him or her, in this case a him, to take out the credit card payment thingy, and he's not even making a move. And I'm waiting my credit card already. And then I realized when we get to the airport, he just opens the trunks and says, we're here, sir. And I'm like, right, exactly. I don't even need to pay here. It's everything happens in the background. So it's that kind of experience that we're looking for. And I think traditional taxi companies, they missed out on that. So that's a small customer experience thing that can deteriorate your business. I think that's one of the reasons why these alternative solutions have grown as quickly as they have.
Yeah, there's, for example, that Mutex example I was just taking. It comes from those 5 stars. You have to be sensitive to the customers. Because there's a rating system. Previously, there was no rating system for taxi drivers. Usually, there was probably some way of complaining if something went really badly wrong.
Yeah.
But usually, there was no way. And now the drivers know that if they're not checking what's the vibe of the customer, what they want, do they want to talk, do they want to do work, or how they feel, it will be impacting their ratings, and sometimes they will be kicked off from the system totally.
Absolutely, and this is kind of funny. It goes both ways, actually. I learned that this kind of the hard way when traveling in, I think it was in Minneapolis. Yeah, I was traveling there, and I stayed at an Airbnb apartment. And the landlord, looked at me when I came in the door and greeted me, of course, and was very friendly. And then we went upstairs and he showed me the premises and everything. And I had like the total floor there for myself in a 2-story building. Yeah, but it was pretty great. Yeah, good experience. And he told me, yeah, I was a little bit worried accepting you as my host. And I said, what do you mean about that? He said, yeah, because you've been a little bit critical when it comes to some apartments that you'll be staying at in different parts of the world. And I said, yeah, I like to give feedback, and I like to be honest about this feedback. I'm not nitty-gritty, and I don't want to downplay things, and I don't want to raise some negative things to an unnecessary proportion. But I just want to highlight, okay, if it's dirty in the corners or on the floor or wherever the bed is not made or something like this, of course I want to highlight this to people so that we get a system that actually works. But he said, yeah, because we want to keep he wants to keep his superhost badge. So I can't afford taking customers who are not giving me a 5-star rating. And I thought, wow, man, think about this, Petri. I mean, the whole system is wired in that way that those ones who want to have high ratings also want to choose their customers. Okay? So this kind of puts the pressure on both sides. This is good and bad, of course. But in a bad way, it is that, okay, you don't get rewarded for really being honest about things. So this can also kind of twist the thing. So this basically just shows that how you can actually misuse the system. So it actually goes against the whole intended way of how things are going to go. So the system might twist the whole reality. So that's also one thing. But it just shows that, okay, these small incidents can have an effect on the customer experience, but it can also have effect on the supplier, in this case, the Airbnb host, a supplier experience.
So what is the dark side of customer relationships? When you say no, when you need to be picky and say, no, I don't want to have you as a customer?
Well, I think that's a great question. And the dark side of close relationships, that actually was a study that was made in 2005 by 2 researchers, and Sandy and Jap. And they studied, and they kind of started a stream looking at customer relationships that turn sour. So the dark side of customer relationships. And that means that you can sometimes have customer relationships which actually turn against you. So it's not always the intended result that we should always give and give and give and give to the customer and make the customer feel super happy all the time. Because at the end of the day, looking at this way, you also want to make a profit, assuming you're not an NGO or non-profit organization. Assuming that you want to make a profit, you should do that also. So then you should start looking at, okay, what customers are worthwhile building a relationship with, which generate a positive result for us, a profit that is, for the customer account. Then there are those customer accounts where we pour in a lot of effort and love and compassion and empathy and all these things, and we make everything we can, but it just doesn't pan out. It's too difficult, or the customer doesn't want, or it works beautifully for a while, but then it turns against you because the customer becomes, or actually maybe the customer, or it might even be supplier, becomes cozy and lazy And so people are in general quite lazy, actually. We as human beings, we're wired to being a little bit lazy. So we're not always as efficient as we proclaim to be and as we want to be. And that can turn against you. So that somebody's taking who you build a customer relationship with or a supplier relationship with, that close relationship turns sour because the other party starts taking advantage of you and of the situation. And it might be intended or it might be unintended. But anyway, the result is that they're taking advantage of it. So you get less than what you actually give or what you pay for. So there was an example in this particular study. And again, I don't want to finger point on any countries or any people, but it's out there. It's knowledge that is out there. There's a car manufacturer who used an Italian car paint company to paint the cars, the chassis of the cars. Now, they were supposed to put a couple of layers of the paint on the car. I don't remember the exact number, but let's say it's 3 layers of paint, right? And they did that in the beginning, but then they started kind of cheating because they thought, well, we can cut costs by just putting 2 layers of spray or color on the car. So they did that. They only went with 2. So they saved 1. Okay, so you can just imagine if you have thousands, tens of thousands of cars, even more, and you save 1 round of paint on each of every of its cars. It aggregates. The numbers get big very quickly. But they were caught for that. So they got caught and they then admitted, yeah, sure, yeah, we did this. So of course the customer relationship, it turned sour. They were not chosen anymore to continue the contract and so forth, so they lost the contract. But anyway, so this just shows that even in a intended good relationship, things can turn sour if there are enough loopholes and the person or the organization thinks that we can get away with it. So this is the dark side of relationships. And as I said, it can go in both ways. It can go that the customer becomes too cozy or complacent or just wants to cheat and take advantage of you. Or it might be that the supplier does that. So it depends on. There are also measures how you actually go about this. And there are a few methods how you can actually avoid this situation. So it's not as dark as it sounds that, okay, we have to run this risk, but we can also avoid these risks. It's possible.
So trust but verify.
Trust but verify, yeah, the kind of one, but kind of I was referring to the methods of how to do that. So one, for example, is that you have a mutual agenda, that you have mutual targets set out there and written down so that you actually know exactly what you're supposed to be doing, and then both are more vested in that. It can be, of course, that the output-based model, so basically that what you get out of the business, both profit from that. That's another way. A third way is reporting and monitoring, of course, so that you, as you said, that you trust, but you do monitor. So you need to have certain visits, and it might be that you agree in the contract that we will do visits to your facilities, and we don't have to report about it that in advance. We just pop in and we do basically a raid of what you're doing. So this is one method. It's kind of on the brutal side, but very efficient. And then there's also personal relationships, so that we don't rely on a few people actually doing the business, because they might be working and collaborating. So when we have the larger part of the organization involved in this, then we have different kind of layers and different people who are also vested in this decision and in this methodology and processes and working models, so that we can better ensure that we don't skip any important steps or work in a subpar manner. So these are just some very basic things how we can do things. Of course, investment models can also be used for that. So you buy up a chunk of that company and you get more say in that company, for example.
How do you make people want to buy from you?
I think it's quite easy in the way that if you are looking at the customer value, I mean, many people talk about customer experience. Let's just differentiate between two different things here. Customer experience is the kind of total experience that you as a customer get from dealing with someone. And that can be through marketing, social media, as we said, the janitor in the premises, or what the executives say in the media, or it can be how the person is treating you on the phone, email, whatever channel that is. So that's the customer experience. And that will then result in some customer or some value for the customer. Okay, so there's some value attached to that. Okay, what type of experience? If it's a negative or positive, or if it's actually tapping into your personal values also, that is probably going to be stronger. So if you will help through the customer experience and through the customer interactions, which are part of that total customer experience, if we through those instances help the customer create value for them and succeed better or solve their situation, what they're aiming at, then the customer might and probably perceives us as meaningful for them, for achieving their goal, for achieving their wishes, for achieving their deep dreams, or at least getting closer to those. And that in itself can then create a platform for success for us. That means if somebody finds that, okay, I get it, I get value out of this by working with Petri, for example, in his company, okay, and he works in a way, and they as an organization work in a way that I think is a good way for my company, for my needs, for my wishes, then of course I want to go back to you and say, okay, I want to continue working with you. And that's a great platform for success going forward. Of course, assuming that does not generate profit yet, but it generates a platform, it creates a platform for success. And that means if your organization then does things in a nice way that I think this is the way we should be working in together, and you're able to articulate the value that I get out of working with you and through the use of the services or products or solutions that your company produces, and I then understand that, and I can also put a price tag on that, and I can understand, okay, this will help me do this and this quicker, save time, or generate more money, or make me feel more secure if it's a security solution, whatever it is, or make me live longer, for example, then I'm willing to probably pay for that or to give something in return. It can be that I give my data. Now that's the money that you make money on then, or that's the currency that you make money on then. Or it might be that I actually pay something for that. And once the payment, in which form or shape it is, if that payment for your services that creates value for me is in line with that level of value that I feel that I'm getting out of this, if that's on a good level, then I'm willing to pay for that. But again, if you under promise and overachieve as an organization, then your company is actually leaving money on the table. This sounds very harsh. And the reverse also applies. If you overpromise and underachieve, then I as a customer am the one who is missing out on things. So you're overcharging in that way. So I think they should be in some kind of a balance that is close enough. And usually it's a good balance, and the customer wants to come back if they feel that they actually get a little bit more value than they paid for. And then, of course, it's up to your organization or the seller's organization to see that we don't burn the money along the way before it then translates into profits for the organization and maybe shareholders or whatever we have. So that's how we actually can make customers want to come back. So we need to be attractive. We need to be known as the go-to organization, and each and every person in that organization optimally should be known as the go-to person for whatever area of responsibility that person has, whether he or she is a product manager or project manager or delivery person or service person or salesperson or marketing person, whatever it is that the customer is looking for at that instant in those very specific customer interactions. Each and every one optimally should be the go-to person that the customer comes first in mind is that, okay, I want to work with this person. and that happens to be the person in your organization, then we have a good shot at the customer wanting to come back. So I want to go that way. You see that I have kind of a maybe soft approach in things, but it has that there's a profit, of course, attached to that. So a profit expectation is attached to that value generation. It's not just about giving, but we give and give, and then we have to be able to also get in return. So as opposed to forcing people to buy from you, that's the worst scenario we can have. So that we force people to buy from us because we think that we have a lock-in situation, or we actually have a lock-in situation, or we are the monopoly company, or we have a dominant market position, and we force customers to buy from us. Well, guess how long they will be willing to come back to us? Only for as long as they have to. As soon as they have an alternative, like we discussed with the taxi business, then they might jump ship. So you might end overnight losing 20-30% of your business, or even more, as soon as there is an alternative. So I think that's why I kind of proclaim and think very highly of looking at the customer end of things, and the customer experience, and the customer value.
You were not always academic before you were actually doing sales and building sales organizations. Can you tell something about that? Before we go into that story, tell something funny. You just mentioned me about you were in France, in Paris, and something happened while you were with the customers. Let's have a bit of fun and then go to your personal story.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, it was quite a funny story. It was actually happening in already 1990, late 90s, 1996 it was, in France, in Paris. So we had a meeting, and I was working for an organization at that point in time. So before my academic career, I worked 15 years in selling and sales management in the area of B2B and B2G, so business to government. So I was representing Finland, where I was based in at that time. 8 people represented different countries in Europe, and we met up in Paris for a meeting. And we went to this nice hotel, and we had the host was the French director, and he took us to this restaurant, and we went there, and we had a great dinner with French wine and French food and French everything, and which I like very much, but I didn't know how it works. So after a main course, they come and ask, okay, so any desserts, anyone? And I was a big fan of cheese. I like different kinds of cheese and so forth. It goes well with wine. And the French executive told me that, okay, well, why don't you take the cheese platter? And I said, yeah, I'll do that. And I ordered that. And the waiter comes back after a moment with a small cart filled with cheese. I mean, filled to the brim with cheese. And I was, oh my God, he really understood that I really, really love cheese. So there are all kinds of cheeses there. And he brought it next to me, next to my where I was sitting at the end of the table. And I thought, wow, this is going to take a while. So I started eating, and I kept on eating the cheese. And then the waiter comes back, and is kind of grabbing the cart. And I said, no, please don't take it yet. And and then he came back, and the French executive looked at me and, oh, you really like cheese, Paul? And there was kind of a hint that I didn't get it. And I said, yeah, I love cheese. And then I continued eating, and I'm just about to explode. And the fourth time, the waiter came back. Fourth time, the waiter came back.
Man, you don't take hints.
Exactly. When he came back, and I said, I really sincerely apologize, but I'm so stuffed. I can't have any more of your cheese. I'm sorry. I can't have it all. And he said, that's okay, sir. And he took the cart and wheeled off. And I was a little bit like, okay, well, at least he didn't take it as an offense. And then the French executive, he tapped me on my shoulder and whispered in my ear and said, Paul, you were just supposed to take a few bites of the cheese on your table. And he would bring it to the next tables, the rest of the cheese. Because as you see, all the other tables are looking at you, and they were actually waiting for the cheese, which you have almost like eaten up already. That was my kind of, being in the deep end of the pool in France when it comes to cheese, and I was not able to swim there. So sometimes. It's a bit embarrassing a story, but it's kind of fun when you look at years back.
Did you close the sales?
Yeah, well, it was actually more of a strategy meeting that we had there. So, but we did succeed very well in that company. So at least it generated money, what we were doing there in Paris. So that's kind of a bit of a nice story, I think.
Did you start with sales? Did you do something else before? You've been also working in startups and building sales organizations. Can you tell something about your early days?
Sure. Yeah.
And then why did you come to do what you do now?
Yeah. It's there's a story to that too, as to almost everything. So when I actually studied economics and marketing and business. And in those days, there were no courses in selling and sales management at a university. So I did my master's of science in economics, majoring in marketing and international sales, or international business and finance, actually. And then I started working for an automotive company. That was the company I was working for when being in Paris, which I just explained. And then I moved from there to Germany. And it was a sales position that I was in. So I wanted to work in sales from day one when I left the business school at the university. So I decided I want to work in sales. And the reason for that was that my dad used to work in sales. Now he has passed away, but he used to work in sales. And I learned at a very young age that if you work in sales, you can travel a lot if you want to. If you want to work in international sales, you have to travel. And I just happened to love traveling. That was one of the things that I liked about my job, and also the freedom to make choices. I mean, big choices also when it comes to selecting customer accounts and working on those, and being able to talk to different level of people in the organization. So you can talk to CEOs, you can talk to anybody in the strategy department if you have a compelling story. You're probably going to talk to everybody from purchasing and logistics up to marketing, up to their sales, up to their product management, up to their C-level, and so forth. So it's kind of almost like being a consultant. Of course, I was working in more complex solutions and so forth, complex solution selling, you might call it. And that kind of gave me an opportunity to work at different levels and really creating business for companies. And I was quite successful at doing that. And there was one company I jumped in. They hired me, and I was number 9 when I entered, and I think we were just short of 100 people when I left the organization. And then, of course, we were building sales and being quite successful at that. And when you are that, then other people start saying, okay, hey, could you do the same for our company? So actually I was involved in about 16.
Let's pause for just a quick question.
Sure.
Paul, are you a cowboy?
Well, I was kind of a semi-cowboy, yeah. I was a semi-cowboy in the sense that I was, if you're referring to being successful.
Were you the top sales guy?
Yeah, I was.
Who took once the call and then next day you were gone?
I was that, and it worked out very nicely. I can say
for you,
for me, yeah, but also that's why I said semi-cowboy, because I didn't just think about my profit generation mechanism and how I profit from that, but I always have been looking at, okay, how can the organization and the shareholders of those organizations profit from what we're doing? So I always try to keep the bigger scope and also foremost look at, okay, what's in it for the customer? And I think that has been the determining factor for me to succeed in different companies, because I don't have a one model fits all. Well, maybe the one model would actually be that I'm looking at the customer and what makes them tick and what makes them successful, and then derive the way I'm working in different organizations from that point. So, yeah, and I've always very keen on building a team around me. So knowing whom to contact when the customer needs something, or even at customers. I never left it up to the customer to find the person in their organization. I always did almost like headhunting in their organization to find who's responsible for this, who's responsible for that, who can help us further in that. So back in the days when I was working in the telecom sector, I was helping 16 at least startups. Startups in the sense that either they were startups in Europe, or they were established companies in the US, but who did not have a any substantial operations or any operations in Europe. So those were companies who contacted me and said, we would like you to build a sales organization for us and create sales for us. And that's what I did. So those were startups, usually in the software and telecoms industry. So that's how I know quite a lot about how to build startups and how to build organizations that work, and what you should focus on, especially if you're on the innovative side of things, where you have an innovative product and innovation, which you then try to bring out in the market. And then, of course, there are many hoops and loops you need to get through. And one of them is, how far do we productize it before we go out in the market, in order to make it still able to flex that and to adjust it to according to the market needs and so forth. So there's kind of a balance there. So that's what I did. And I, of course, ended up recruiting a lot of people in these organizations, because my job was to start from scratch. Usually I was the first person, the first cowboy to work for them. And then my job was to take ownership and responsibility for that operation in Europe. So my job was to find a strategy for it, or create a strategy, look at, do they have a strategy? Should that be tweaked or completely revamped, or what should we do about it? Does it work in the same strategy that they have in the US, for example, in North America? Does it work in Europe, or should it be changed? And many times it needed to be changed. So I did kind of a strategy part of that first, and then it comes into to bring those ideas and concepts and sometimes even products, if they are ready, to friendly customers that I knew in the telecom sector or software industry, or large enterprises or even smaller enterprises, and try them out and find out, okay, what could be the market for these? Who could be interested, and why should they be interested, and what could that generate them, and how should we price it, and all these models, what could the business with payment model be, etc., etc. And I hired then the salespeople for those organizations. Of course, not every organization was successful. Some of them I had to kind of turn down and say, okay, well, I did screen about 100 companies per year that I was looking for or looking at when they wanted me to work with them. So there was a lot of inbound companies coming, and out of those were 16, 17 companies filtered out that I worked for. Usually I worked 2 companies concurrently because they were in different stages. So that was possible. And when I hired salespeople for these organizations to build their sales teams and then hand over the accounts to them that I had signed and won or developed, and then they continue that, and at the end of the day, I replaced myself with an executive hired from another company, from the market. I had one common problem in these organizations. The problem was finding salespeople, right? Finding the right type of salespeople. And that's why I thought that, well, I'll do the shortcut. Why don't I just go to universities and business schools who have selling and sales programs and contact their alumni and find good people there? And I went to different schools in different countries, or called them and contacted them and asked, well, do you have a sales program? And they said, no, we don't. And every university basically turned me down, and they said, we don't have that. And I said, how can that be? This was back in 2008. How can you have business schools still today who don't have a selling and sales program? I mean, how is that even possible? I mean, Patrick, think about it. You have finance, you have HR, you have organization theory, you have bookkeeping, you have everything, you have marketing, but sales is not there.
Oh, who needs sales?
Exactly. My point exactly. Who needs sales? Why bother, right? So nothing had really changed since the days when I studied at university level. So I thought that, well, maybe somebody should do something about it. And that
sounds like an entrepreneur approach.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of a problem-solving approach. Okay, what do we do about this? No, we should fix this, right? So that's what I did. And I contacted a business school in Finland, where I kind of knew the professor a little bit from 15 years before, when I had taken a course there. And I contacted him and I said, is it true that your business school doesn't have a selling and sales program? He said, that's right, Paul, we don't. I said, well, shouldn't you have? And I said, yeah, I totally agree with you. We should have. And that's when I said, okay, well, what if I did a Ph.D. in my naivety, I didn't know what it actually entails. But I asked him, so what if I did a PhD in selling and sales management? Could that maybe inspire somebody in the organization and the community to actually to do something about it and start creating a program for that and start creating courses for that and doing research in that and making that appealing for the students? And he said, well, it could. Yeah, sure, it could. And then he said, why? I said, well, let me fly there next week. I flew up to Finland to meet with this person in question. And within 2 hours, I'd explained to him what I could do a PhD on, what I could do it on, so what would the problem area be, and so forth and so forth. And he kind of helped me reroute it and redraft it. And then he said, okay, so if you have the time and money for that, so money, of course, in Finland is not an issue in terms of education, because the education itself does not cost, but he was referring to the alternative cost of not doing my profit-generating work, but rather spend some of my time on doing a PhD thesis. And the course is related to that. And I said, sure, yeah, I think I can do that. So I'll just take a sabbatical from my work and do that. And I thought it would take 1 year or 2 years or something like this maximum. And naive as I was, so kind of second year is approaching its end, and I'm like, kind of, wow, I'm still not even close to being ready. And then I thought, okay, now I have to ditch the projects that I'm working on. I'm not going to take on any new projects. So I'm going to really focus. The third year, I focused completely on the PhD. And the fourth year, then I was finished. So 4 years after entering the university or business school, I was ready with a PhD. And I thought that was very slow. I mean, of course, for an entrepreneur and people being entrepreneurs and kind of fast-minded in business, we want things to happen yesterday, right? So I thought this was quite slow a pace. And I always said, well, maybe it's because I was working half-time the 2 first years, right? But then it kind of, somebody told me that, okay, Paul, you're obviously not aware that it takes about 5.8 years for people at this business school to get their PhDs. So I was still about 2 years ahead of the average person as a PhD there.
What's the number usually done for full-time students? So 5.8 full-time, and you did it only 1 year full-time and 2 years before just part-time.
Correct, yeah. That's part of the equation, yeah. Yeah, it is.
And in the beginning, you said that this is the shortcut to recruit people.
Exactly, I did. And little did I know, because I was traveling. I was living in southern France at that point in time. And I was traveling there. I had to buy an ice hockey bag in Finland. I actually went to a sports goods store. And I bought the biggest ice hockey bag I could find. And you know what it was for?
No idea. I don't even want to guess.
For books. So I had about 30-40 kilos of books and articles printed in my bag that I was carrying around Europe when going from place to place to visit some clients and reading the books.
For real?
Yeah, for real. And reading the books in the evenings and reading them on the airplanes and so forth. So,
talking about cupping luggage.
Exactly. And
traveling light, I just have this T-shirt, but it's the books.
Yeah, and actually Lufthansa caught me once on this, and it was actually when I was leaving Finland. I had again stacked up some books in my bag, and because I had that was a bag, I kind of had it as sports goods always in my luggage, and then I had a regular check-in bag, and then I had my cabin bag, okay, and then I had my laptop bag also with me. So I had kind of 4 bags that I was carrying around. The ice hockey bag being the most, weighing the most, of course. So at one time, at the Helsinki airport, they actually stopped me when I was checking in the bag, and I had the bag tag already printed and everything ready to go, as usual. And they said, "Sir, would you be kind and open the bag?" And I said, "No, what, you want to see my ice hockey things, or what? It's pretty smelly. It's still like sweaty things in there." "Yeah, but sir, we need to see what it is." And I reluctantly, I opened the zipper, and the person goes like, "This is not ice hockey material here." I said, "Well, oh yeah, I have some books here." And they looked through the bag, and they only found books there and binders of articles. And I said, "Sir, this is not what sports goods bags are for. for transporting the books. And I said, yeah, sorry, I'm in the middle of my PhD thesis here, so I need to carry these things and I can't do it otherwise. And I was nice to them, and they got the problem and so forth, and being a salesperson, sweet talking things and so forth. And they kind of said, okay, we can write off so and so many kilos from this, but for the rest you have to pay. So I think it was 10 euros per kilo that I had to pay extra for that. It became a little bit of an expensive bag for me to carry around, but this was really in the latter part of the dissertation period that this happened. So I had to carry that, I don't know how many times across Europe. And it always worked as a charm. But this time I was caught, and then after that I started paying attention to how many kilos of books I carry around.
So you throw in some skates and a towel there as well.
Exactly, yeah, some sweaty undies and so forth to just kind of distract them from the whole fact. But yeah, that as you said, it was kind of a long route to finding people. And then it didn't stop at that, actually. But what happened was that at the business school, their MBA school, it's the Hanke School of Economics of Finland, their MBA school asked me, Paul, could you do selling and sales management course for our executive MBAs? I said, sure, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can put it together, but who's going to give it? Well, we thought you would. I said, well, that's a lot to ask, but okay, I could do it 1 year. So, but then you have to find somebody to replace me on it and continue with that. And now it's like the 7th year or something that I'm giving that course. So they didn't find a replacement, but I'm still looking at finding a replacement for myself so I can actually focus more on business even in the future.
So are there now more sales departments, and are there more people doing sales? And
I don't want to mention the name, but there was a very promising doctoral student that I had, actually the first at Hanke School of Economics, focusing on selling and sales management. But she was recruited to a company.
Oh, that's the reason they're all recruited away.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
yeah, and people, even master students who take I give some courses at Hanke still for the at least until end of this year. I've done that. So now the past, I've had actually 2 professorships in selling and sales management, one at Hanke School of Economics and one at the rival university, the other big university in Finland. So I had concurrently 2 professorships in selling and sales management, those universities. So that just shows that there is a demand for that, but there was too little supply. So I was chosen to be that 2 rivaling schools at the same time. So that just shows how much interest there is. Of course, few salespeople come back to academia. I'm one of the stupid people, one of the few in the world who have actually done that. And I still sometimes I ask myself, I'm not so sure it was the most intelligent move that I've ever done in my life, but it has certainly given a lot to those hundreds or maybe a couple of thousand already students that I've actually taught through the years in selling and sales management. So positive side of things is they get good jobs. Okay, they are really quickly hired, and I get organizations contact me and say, Paul, could you maybe pass on our information that we have a job opening in this area to your students, for example, or to your previous students, which I have quite a good contact with, to at least some of those, not all. And I think this kind of has worked nicely on a higher level, if you will, that from a social perspective from my part, from my microscopic view, I've actually helped maybe the industry become a little bit better in terms of selling and sales management through the output of the students that I've actually been teaching, and also hopefully the research that I've been doing in this area. I'm going to focus more going forward now on, again, working with the companies and getting involved. I'm sitting in the board of a company, very interesting company, and my area of kind of what I'm looking at is how they develop their sales and how they could perform better and how they could become more customer focused and focusing more on customer value. So these are kind of things that I'm going to work on more going forward. So this is kind of maybe a sneak preview of what's coming next year and so forth, the years after that. I will probably keep one foot in the academia, but it's getting less and less because I have more interest in working in the business area.
What is your favorite word?
My favorite word, or maybe a name, is loppan. Now that means flea in Swedish, and that's what I call my daughter. And she loves that. That's a very common word in Sweden. If you go to some playgrounds and there are kids and their parents usually call them loppan. But I think that's such a sweet word and kind of very catchy when it comes to small children. I love that.
What is your least favorite word?
It must be greed. Greed, like Gordon Gekko said in the Times in the film that greed is good. I think greed is not good. I think there needs to be some target orientedness, but greed is not the thing in my vocabulary, at least not the favorite ones.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Creatively, I think it's water. I think it doesn't matter if I'm taking a shower or if I'm swimming in a swimming pool or a lake or in the sea, or if I'm surfing the waves somewhere on Bali sitting on my surfboard. Usually when I'm on the surfboard riding it, then I don't have time to think anything. But when I'm sitting there waiting for the waves, that's kind of where things come into my mind. Maybe it's because that's a few occasions that I really can let go of things. So that's also a spiritual experience, almost. I mean, not taking a shower, but I mean, surfing. That's kind of what I would say. That's a spiritual and also emotional experience. I think one emotional experience was in Colorado, training executives there, and I was up and looking at the Sawtooth Mountain. Sawtooth Mountain, that's up in the hills, up in the mountains. And it was just such a beautiful evening. And the clouds were just phenomenal. The lighting was perfect. And there was only the wind that I could hear. That was maybe the most spiritual experience that I've had an earthly experience that I've had from a spiritual point of view.
What turns you off?
Well, I think it goes together with greed and stress. I mean, certain type of stress is good, but if I see that the stress is either greediness or unmeaningful, then I think that really turns me off.
What is your favorite curse word?
Fan, a Swedish word which means damned. Maybe not the most powerful words in terms of cursing, but that's gotta be it, yeah.
What sound or noise do you love?
When my daughter comes next to me early in the morning and she whispers in my ear and says, "Daddy, are you awake?" I think that's the most beautiful sound that I can hear. Apart from that, it would be the waves.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Scooters. I really, when living down in southern France, you know the story. You've been there yourself. You live there yourself, and you know the amount of scooters out there. It's just.
We are not talking about the e-scooters.
No, we're definitely not. We're talking the old school, smelly, petrol fumey, horrible scooters. I mean, with those drive uphill next to your apartment, that just drives me nuts.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
That's a difficult one. Of course, I have hobbies. Yeah, that's one thing. But turning hobbies into a profession, like photography, for example, or surfing, not that I ever imagined that I could compete with Kelly Slater and the guys and be successful at that, at least. Not winning them. But so I think I'm trying to kind of keep it. I'm a little bit trying to evade the question, maybe in the sense that I know what I do. I'm good at what I do. I know what I do. I've read the things that I do. I've studied them and so forth. So I think I'm pretty good when it comes to my own profession. But so I want to stick to that. I don't want to become something that I'm not very good at. Maybe it has with age to do. So I get a little bit more careful with by age, that I try to stick to my guns.
What profession would you not like to do?
I don't really know if there's any profession that I would not like to do. Maybe working in coal mine that's probably got to be one of those areas. So any profession which is hazardous or dangerous and which I cannot make sound judgment or decisions on, I think any of these, and monotonous work, sorry anybody doing that out there, but doing something, for example, driving a taxi. We spoke about taxi before, but driving a taxi, for example, would just make me go nuts. Partly because of my back, because I have a little bit of bad back, sports injuries. So it doesn't allow me to sit so much. So I try to avoid that. The same goes for airline captain, for example, or pilot. I couldn't do that either because of that reason. That would be nicer, but at least you get to travel. But yeah, I guess I will not do that.
If you could be a co-founder of any startup in any era, which one would you choose?
Well, it could be Amazon back in the days when Jeff Bezos started it. I mean, that could be. I think it was such a brilliant story how he came up with the whole business and changing from what he did before that to changing into what he did with Amazon. Now it has, of course, grown a little bit out of proportion that I would like to run it. Back in the early days, I think that could be one of those. I'm not saying that it would be the only one, but it probably could be one of those companies.
Any final words for the audience?
Well, maybe final words is that we've been talking about startups, we've been talking about corporations. And many people say that, okay, or at least I keep hearing this, that, okay, but it differs. Paul, what you do and what you teach and what you train and how you advise companies to work, it works nicely in corporations, but it doesn't work for startups. And I disagree with that, because looking at it this way, they both are usually looking at the same types of customers. It might be exactly the same customer that you're approaching. So it doesn't differ that much if you as a vendor are a startup, a small company, even a one-man show, or if you're a corporation with 50,000 employees. Because at the end of the day, the customer has a challenge, okay? They have something they want to get solved, or they need something and so forth. And I think understanding that avenue and embracing that idea of we're in it for the customer and for creating value for the customer. The one who creates most value for the customer is probably going to be the one who wins the deal, okay? And I think my advice is that regardless if you're a corporation or a startup, the executives in the organization, whether it's you and your dog or it's you and your C-level people, need to embrace the whole idea of customer value creation. If you're in it for the long term. Of course, if you're deciding on a week, we just want to compete by having the lowest price. Well, good for you for as long as it works for your company. But the day might come that somebody else offers something cheaper. So then you are in the game of having to choose your strategic route again. So oftentimes we come back to the point that, okay, customer value creation is the most important. Then, of course, you need to understand your customer. Understand your customer. That will be the second bullet point of my list of my that I would say. First, understand or embrace the whole value concept. Then understand your customers. And then from that, you can then derive how you work. What's the approach going to be? What's the strategy going to be for your strategies that you apply in your company? What's the process going to look like, or processes for different customers, types and so forth, categories? And what are the actions and activities that we're going to do as an organization? And then that would be the third one. The fourth one would be to have the support and guidance system. So all the CRMs, all the reporting, everything should be aligned with, so that you actually create value for your customer and appropriate value for your organization. That is, get value back for your organization. So don't just leave it at that level that, okay, we now have the process, we have the activities, but you should follow up. Just like we spoke about the only 25% of the companies in the study that I referred to earlier had a selling process in place that were actually monitoring that. And they were the ones who were the most successful ones. So you need to do that. You need to follow up on things. You need to have a support system that helps your organization work in the intended way and in the intended direction. And then each one in the organization and who's facing the customer, either directly or indirectly, to wanting to become the go-to person in that his or her specific domain and field of competence and role. So I think these are all important. These 5 bullet points are really, really important, regardless if you're a startup or if you are a global operating corporation. So I think these are the same. Yeah, that would probably be it.
Thank you, Paul. There's so much information here. And hopefully we reduced a bit of the chaos and confusion, complexity in sales, but I have a feeling maybe we increased a bit as well.
Maybe we did. Yeah, things aren't always as simple as we kind of want them to be. We need to understand first. And when we have to look at it enough in detail, we get the clarity, and then we see through the whole problem. Then that's how we know, okay, but this is how we should do it.
That was quite a journey. What was your favorite part, and what did we miss? Let me know. I'm happy to cover more sales-related topics in the future. For sure. We did not talk about pricing at all. Sorry about that. That was my intention from the very beginning, but since it's a huge topic, I did not want to make this episode any longer than it already is. Thanks for listening. Until next time.